He built an empire from nothing. But on the day he was meant to marry the woman he thought would end his loneliness, she live-streamed his humiliation to the world. Left standing alone at the altar, billionaire Andre Miller thought he'd lost everything that mattered. Until the one woman he'd overlooked, the quiet, loyal secretary who had always stayed in the background, stepped forward. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The rain struck the rooftop of the group home in thin, erratic streams. A boy no older than 8 sat on the cold windowsill, his knees hugged tightly to his chest. His name was Andre Miller, and even then, he knew what it meant to be utterly alone. Not the kind of alone that came when a room was empty, but the deeper kind. The kind that seeped into your skin when no one looked for you, asked about you, or remembered your birthday. He was the last child left unchosen that year. The other children had left one by one, gripping the hands of new parents or relatives who had finally shown up. Andre never cried. He had learned early that tears didn't bring anyone back. Instead, he read anything he could find. Manuals, discarded textbooks, user guides from broken electronics. Information became his only companionship, logic his protection. If no one would love him, he would at least make himself indispensable to the world. By 16, he had tested out of high school and secured a scholarship to a state university, one he accepted while sleeping in a shelter. He wore the same jacket every day, barely ate enough to stay awake through class, but his mind remained razor-sharp. Professors called him gifted. Employers called him obsessive. He didn't correct them. They weren't wrong. The years that followed were grueling. Days bled into nights, and sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. He worked as a junior programmer by day, coded his own software at night, and slowly, methodically, built the foundation of what would become MillerTech Global, a cybersecurity giant before he turned 30. And yet, despite the soaring glass towers bearing his name, despite the opulent condo overlooking the skyline, despite the millions who followed his every move in financial magazines, Andre Miller came home to silence. The kind of silence that mocked his success. There was no one to greet him when he returned from board meetings. No family to share his wins, no one to remind him to eat or rest. He had everything, except connection. Women came and went, mostly models, influencers, entrepreneurs eager to align themselves with a powerful name. But their affection never felt rooted in anything real. They loved the man on paper, not the boy who once sat alone at a window watching the world forget him. In the corner office of his 72nd floor headquarters, there was one constant, Elena Gray. She had been with him since year 4 of the company. She was efficient, discreet, precise. She rarely spoke unless spoken to and never overshared. Yet somehow everything ran smoother when she was around. He never needed to repeat himself. Meetings were scheduled perfectly. Documents arrived before he asked. She anticipated his needs without fanfare. But Andre never looked at her beyond her role. To him, she was part of the machine that kept his empire running. Loyal, dependable, familiar. It was a Wednesday when he stood in his private elevator, watching his reflection in the mirrored walls. His custom-tailored suit fit perfectly. His watch cost more than most cars. But when he looked into his own eyes, he saw only exhaustion. And beneath that, a terrible hunger, not for money, but for someone to care if he disappeared tomorrow. That night, after a lonely dinner in his penthouse dining room, lit more for ambience than comfort, he opened his personal phone. A message from a verified account blinked on his screen. "Hey, billionaire boy. Saw you on the Forbes cover. Let's get coffee sometime. You seem..." Intriguing winking face, Celeste M. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button. He was tired of eating alone. Tired of drinking wine while scrolling through the lives of strangers who seemed so full of joy. And maybe, just maybe, this time it would be different. He didn't notice the email Elena had left in his inbox. An updated schedule for tomorrow, neatly outlined, with a reminder about a board member's birthday. He didn't notice the subtle, handwritten note she had attached with it. You've been working nonstop for months. Consider taking a personal day. You deserve it. He never saw it. Instead, he replied to Celeste. And the story began. The cafe she chose was not the kind you stumbled into. It was the kind designed for Instagram. White marble countertops, gold-accented shelves, and tiny pink flowers suspended in glass orbs above each table. The baristas wore matching linen aprons and offered lavender oat lattes with heart-shaped foam. Andre Miller walked in, already regretting the location. He wore a gray overcoat over a tailored navy suit, and yet he still felt out of place. Everyone here seemed to be smiling into phone cameras. He scanned the room and saw her before she saw him. Celeste Monroe. Even in person, she looked airbrushed. Her platinum blonde hair fell in perfect curls past her shoulders. Her lips curved in a practiced pout as she posed with her phone angled just right. She wore a cream sweater that clung to her in flattering places and gold earrings shaped like stars. When she finally looked up and met his eyes, her face transformed into something dazzlingly warm. Andre, she said, standing and leaning in, not for a handshake, but for a photo. Let's grab a selfie real quick before our drinks come. He stood awkwardly as her arm wrapped around his waist, phone already raised. She snapped the picture before he had time to react. Okay, now we can say hi. She said it like she was teasing, but her tone held the edge of someone who expected this kind of entrance to go unchallenged. He let out a light chuckle. You're efficient. I'm an influencer, babe. Content before caffeine, she winked. They sat. At first, Andre was disarmed by how effortlessly charming she was. She called herself a creative entrepreneur and talked about brand partnerships, lifestyle design, self-love, and how she was really into energy work right now. She used words like manifestation and alignment without irony. She leaned forward when she laughed and touched his wrist when he spoke. She made him feel seen. More importantly, she made him feel wanted. Over the next few weeks, their coffee turned into dinners and dinners into rooftop cocktails. She always wore something stunning, sometimes designer, sometimes indie, but always curated. Andre noticed her habit of adjusting the lighting at restaurants, of taking 5 shots of a dish before touching it, of talking to her phone more than to the waiter. But she also laughed at his dry humor. She clung to his arm when paparazzi spotted them. She once texted him after a business trip. Missed you more than I miss my followers' pleading face, broken heart. He replied instantly. He always did with her. She started coming to his events, charity galas, tech expos, fundraisers. Her followers multiplied with every post they shared together. The public began calling them the Ice King and the Queen of Likes. Articles were written. People speculated whether it was real or PR. But to Andre it felt real. Or close enough to it. For the first time, he had someone to bring to the theater. Someone to share a glass of wine with on a Thursday night. Someone who wrapped her arms around him in front of the world and smiled like she meant it. Behind the scenes, Elena continued to run his calendar like clockwork. She never said a word about Celeste. But Andre could sense something quiet shift in her. She grew even more formal. There was less eye contact. A chill had entered her voice, professional always, but colder than before. Once, during a meeting, Elena reminded him of a board lunch scheduled for the following week. I'll have Celeste join us, Andre said casually. Elena looked up from her tablet. Are you sure that's appropriate? It's a strategic planning meeting with internal stakeholders. She wants to understand my world more, he replied. Elena nodded, lips tightening. Very well. I'll add her to the guest list. He tried not to think about the flicker of something in her eyes. Disappointment? Annoyance? It didn't matter. Celeste was the one who made him feel alive again. One evening, after a photo shoot on a yacht, booked by Celeste's agency but celebrated as spontaneous, Andre took her hand and looked at her under the warm setting sun. I think I want this, he said softly. Not just now. I mean long-term. She smiled wide, like she had been waiting for this. Good, she whispered. Because I've already picked out the hashtag for our wedding. He laughed, more from nerves than amusement. You're serious? Dead serious, she said, kissing his cheek. You're my king. I want the world to see what love looks like. And in that moment, despite the performance, despite the cameras, despite the curated perfection, Andre believed her. He didn't see the smirk she gave her assistant later that night as she whispered, "Can you imagine the clicks this is gonna get?" He didn't notice how she had started referring to him as her billionaire on streams, like he was an accessory. He didn't know that a private group chat filled with influencers already had bets going on how long the wedding stunt would last. To him, she was the first person who chose him without obligation. The ring he had made was custom, flawless sapphire, her birthstone, surrounded by diamonds. She posted it to her story before he even had the chance to announce their engagement publicly. Billionaire Bae put a ring on it, ring sparkles, #celestially his. The internet exploded. Andre didn't care about the comments. He cared that, for the first time, the boy who sat alone on that windowsill had someone who wanted to be his forever. Or so he thought. The morning of Andre Miller's wedding was drenched in gold. Sunlight poured over the sprawling oceanfront estate he had rented for the ceremony, a private cliffside villa overlooking the Mediterranean. Every detail had been meticulously planned by a team of top-tier event designers flown in from 3 countries. Orchids imported from Japan. A classical quartet rehearsing beneath the archway of ivory roses. Personalized crystal glasses for each guest. Even the napkins were embroidered with ANC in golden thread. Andre stood before the floor-length mirror in the master suite, adjusting his cufflinks. His suit was bespoke, dark charcoal with a silk lapel, tailored within a millimeter to perfection. He looked like the man everyone said he was: powerful, successful, untouchable. But inside, his heart was pounding. He barely slept the night before. Not from anxiety, but disbelief. A kind of giddy nervousness that he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. He was getting married today, to someone who made him feel seen, wanted, chosen. He glanced down at his phone. No new messages from Celeste, but that wasn't unusual. She had stayed the night in a separate villa, to keep the suspense, as she'd put it. She'd promised a dramatic entrance, helicopter optional, though she was still deciding. Guests were scheduled to arrive at noon. The ceremony would begin at 2:30 sharp. At 12:45, the villa remained strangely quiet. Andre stood near the front entrance in anticipation. A few of his business associates had sent polite texts about delays. Nothing alarming. Maybe traffic. A celebrity couple that had RSVP'd weeks ago hadn't shown up yet either. Still, he kept glancing toward the valet drive, expecting the rumble of luxury cars, the burst of chatter. At 1:15, he received a message from one of the event planners. "Sir, the guests, they aren't arriving. We've called the hotel concierge. No checkouts were registered for the guest list." His brow furrowed. He called Celeste. No answer. He called again. Straight to voicemail. He texted, "Hey, is everything okay? The guests aren't here yet. Let me know." Nothing. He walked to the edge of the garden terrace, overlooking the sea. The string quartet had stopped playing. The florists, caterers, and coordinators looked unsure, exchanging glances, whispering behind sunglasses. At 1:40, his phone buzzed, not with a reply but with a notification. A live stream. "At Celeste Monroe is now live." He clicked it. There she was, in a silk robe, drink in hand, surrounded by her influencer friends in what appeared to be a luxury hotel suite. Not the bridal villa she had chosen weeks ago. They were all laughing. Celeste turned to the camera with a smirk. "Cheers to dodging a bullet, ladies," she said, clinking glasses with someone off-screen. "Did you really think I was going to marry that socially awkward billionaire with abandonment issues? Please." He's a business-class sob story. Laughter erupted in the background. Another voice chimed in. "Wait, is the ceremony happening right now?" "Probably," Celeste snorted. "Bet he's sitting there waiting, all dressed up and heartbroken. Tragic chic." The comments exploded with laughing emojis and heart reacts. Thousands of viewers poured in. Andre's breath left him in a single, jagged exhale. He stood motionless, phone still in hand, as the video played. His eyes didn't blink. His mouth opened slightly, as though trying to find a breath that would fill the growing emptiness in his chest. The world was watching. Not a celebration. A crucifixion. He dropped the phone. It hit the flagstone with a clatter, screen cracking down the middle. No one else noticed. Everyone was pretending not to look. And yet somehow everyone knew. He stumbled backward into the now empty ceremony space. Rows of white chairs sat untouched. The rose-lined aisle glowed under the sun, beautiful, meaningless. The altar stood dressed in silk and glass, prepared for a bride who was never going to walk down it. Andre sat down on the front row bench, his head in his hands. His fingers pressed into his temples, as if he could crush the pain before it spilled out into the open. He didn't cry. He almost did. But he'd learned as a child that tears didn't bring comfort. They just exposed your weakness to a world eager to exploit it. He inhaled sharply and forced himself to sit upright. A hollow shell of the man who had stood so confidently only hours ago. He was humiliated. Not in private, but in front of millions. The cruelest part wasn't that she didn't love him. It was that she never had. To her, he had been a story. A social stunt. A walking headline with a wallet and a broken childhood she could joke about over champagne. The villa grew quiet. The staff began packing up in silence. The violinists left. The catering crew began boxing the untouched meals. Everyone was disappearing. Again, just like they always had. Until a soft voice broke the silence. "Mr. Miller?" He looked up. Elena stood a few feet away, wearing a navy blue dress, modest, elegant. Her hair was pinned back, her heels dusted from walking on the gravel path. She held no clipboard, no schedule, no phone. Just her presence. He blinked, stunned by her. "Elena?" His voice cracked. "I didn't see a seating chart," she said gently. "So I figured I'd sit somewhere in the back." A bitter smile curled at the edge of his mouth. "There's no one here to block your view." She stepped closer. "I saw the live stream." Of course she did. Everyone had. He looked away, shame burning through him like acid. "I should have known," he muttered. "They all warned me. I was just so desperate not to be alone anymore." She didn't answer right away. Then she walked toward him, past the altar, past the empty chairs, and sat beside him on the front bench. "I've worked beside you for 6 years," she said softly. "And not once did I see you as desperate. I saw you as someone who built a world from ashes and still kept enough humanity to treat people with kindness." He stared at her. "No one's ever said that to me before." She gave him a small smile. "That's because they were too busy taking from you to see you." He looked at her hands, resting in her lap. No polish. No rings. Just steady, warm fingers that had typed his memos, brought him coffee, rearranged his chaos quietly for years. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," he whispered. "You're going to stand up," she said. "And you're going to remember that the person who was left behind today wasn't broken. He was betrayed. And there's a difference." Silence stretched between them. The wind tugged lightly at the silk ribbons around the altar. "I don't want to be alone again," he said. "Not after this." Elena reached for his hand. "You're not." And for the first time in years, maybe in his entire life, Andre Miller allowed someone to simply sit with him in his pain. Not to fix it, not to ignore it, but to share it. And that made all the difference. The villa was nearly empty when the sun dipped below the horizon. The floral arches had been dismantled. The caterers were gone. The sound of the sea carried over the cliffside, rising and falling with the wind. What had once been a palace of perfection now stood like a stage after the final act, beautiful but abandoned. Andre Miller remained seated on the stone bench facing the ocean. His jacket was folded neatly beside him, tie loosened, top button undone. His hands were clasped tightly together between his knees, knuckles white. He hadn't moved much since the live stream. Time had lost its structure. He didn't care that his phone had died, didn't care that headlines were likely already circulating. Billionaire stood up at the altar. Celeste's savage prank on tech tycoon. It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the pit in his stomach and the ache in his chest. the hollow kind that reminded him of being 13 in a group home during Christmas with no visitors, no presents, no one. And yet he wasn't alone. Elena sat quietly next to him, not pressing him, not managing him, just being there. She'd taken off her heels hours ago and rested them neatly under the bench. Her navy dress was wrinkled now from sitting too long, and her pin-straight posture had relaxed. She hadn't left, not even once. Not even when the staff had offered to call him a car. Not when the sun began to set. Not when the lights turned off in the reception hall. She had remained. Silent. Present. And that was more comforting than any words could have been. Finally, as the last traces of daylight dimmed, Andre spoke. "She used me," he said, voice low. "The entire time. From the very beginning." Elena didn't respond with pity. She nodded slowly, as if she was confirming something he already knew, but hadn't been ready to admit aloud. "I thought maybe if I gave her everything," he continued, "if I became the man no one could walk away from, money, stability, loyalty, maybe I'd finally be worth staying for." He looked at her. "And the stupid part is I knew. Somewhere inside me I knew." Elena looked at him then, meeting his gaze without flinching. "You weren't stupid," she said firmly. "You were hopeful. There's a difference." He looked away, eyes stinging. "Hope feels like weakness today." "It's not," she said. "Hope is surviving the worst and still believing something better can exist." He stared at the sea for a long moment. Then, "Why did you come today?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because it wasn't simple. "I came because I knew you'd need someone." He turned his head. "You didn't even like her." "I didn't trust her," she corrected gently. "But I trusted you. And I knew that if today went the way I feared it would, you'd need someone to sit beside you while the noise died down." He exhaled, a slow and painful sound. "Have I ever thanked you, Elena? For what you've done all these years?" She smiled faintly. "Not in words. But yes, in the ways that matter." He studied her now, not just as the assistant who kept his life together, but as the woman who, somehow, had remained the one constant in his ever-expanding, ever-imploding world. "Why didn't I ever notice you before?" he asked, half to himself. She didn't take the question as a compliment. She didn't smile. She simply looked forward again. "Because I wasn't trying to be noticed. I was trying to help." Silence lingered again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. Cleansing, even. Andre looked at her hands. Her nails were short and unpainted, her fingers relaxed. She wasn't adorned in attention-grabbing jewelry, didn't wear heels that demanded adoration. There was no filter on her presence. No pretense. And for the first time, he saw how rare that was. "I don't know how to move forward from this," he said honestly. "You don't have to move yet," she replied. "You just have to stand up." He looked at her again. This time really looked. "You've always been there." Her lips pressed together. She nodded. "And I'll stay," she said. "But not because you need me. Because you're worth staying for." His throat tightened. The words landed not like a compliment, but like a truth he'd never dared believe until now. "Come on," she said, rising to her feet. "Let's get out of here." He hesitated, then reached for her hand, not forcefully, not dramatically. Just a quiet gesture. Asking. Hoping. She took it. And when he stood, he realized something unexpected. The moment wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It was about who had stayed when it did. The tabloids moved on quickly. By the end of the week, Celeste Monroe was basking in viral infamy. Her follower count skyrocketed, her merch sold out, and she announced a new podcast called Unfiltered AF, where she claimed she'd be exposing toxic power dynamics and billionaire entitlement. It was marketed as empowerment, but anyone who had watched the live stream, really watched it, knew what it had been: cruelty wrapped in clout. Andre Miller didn't issue a statement. He didn't hire a crisis manager. He simply disappeared. Not from the business world. Miller Tech continued running like a flawless machine. His board of directors, cautious and eager to support him, encouraged him to take extended leave. He declined. He didn't need to be saved. He just needed to feel real again. And so, in the weeks that followed, he withdrew from the spotlight and emerged as a man quietly searching for something beyond the noise. It started with small things. He left the penthouse and moved into his lakeside cabin just outside the city, a place he hadn't visited in years. He didn't alert his staff. He only told one person, Elena. She didn't ask questions. She simply packed him a small suitcase, added a few handwritten notes into his planner, and placed a worn leather journal on top of his clothes. He opened it on the first night there and found her inscription inside. When you can't speak it aloud, write it down. Start with what hurts. End with what's still left. He wrote every day. Mostly small things, memories, questions, lines of thought he didn't finish. But one night, after 2 glasses of wine and a thunderstorm that reminded him of the night his parents died, he wrote 5 simple words that made his hand tremble. I don't want to be alone. And the next morning, he called her. Not for a meeting. Not for an agenda. Just to talk. I'm tired of hearing my own silence, he said. Then let me come, Elena replied. She arrived that afternoon. No entourage. No laptop. No heels. Just jeans, a navy sweater, and a calm that he hadn't realized he needed until she walked through the door. They didn't do anything extravagant. No private chefs. No luxury excursions. One evening, as they sat near the fireplace, a storm rolled in again, slow, steady rain drumming against the window panes. He looked at her. Not at her hands, not at her features. He looked into her. Past the professionalism. Past the poise. Into the woman who had chosen to stay beside him when the world made him a punchline. You've always been quiet, he said. She turned from the window. And you've always been loud. He smiled faintly. But now I'm quiet too. No, she said gently, meeting his eyes. You're healing. He looked away, emotions welling. I don't know how to do this. This being seen. Without being watched. She walked over and sat beside him. Close. Not touching, but close enough that her warmth grounded him. Then let's not do anything, she said. Let's just be. And so they were. Over the next few weeks, something unspoken unfolded between them. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. But it was true. He started cooking breakfast for her before she woke up. She started leaving little notes in the pockets of his coat. Quotes, affirmations, inside jokes. They watched old movies. Read books on the porch. Danced once to a jazz record neither of them knew, slowly, as if time had loosened its grip. One night, they were walking near the lake. Fireflies flickered. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth. Andre stopped suddenly. I took you for granted, he said. Elena turned to him, brow softening. I let you. He shook his head. No, I don't think I was ready to see you. To really see you. A pause. The world hushed around them. I see you now, he whispered. She didn't cry. But something in her chest broke open. Something she'd kept locked away. Years of loyalty that had gone unacknowledged. Years of quiet affection she'd never dared speak. Then look at me again, she said. And he did. This time, not as the woman who organized his world, but as the woman who had held it when it fell apart. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Not this time. And in that soft, honest night, where no audience watched and no expectations weighed them down, Andre Miller fell in love. Not with a fantasy. Not with a filtered version of reality. But with a woman who had always loved him quietly. And who now loved him freely. The wind rolled gently across the cliff's edge, carrying with it the scent of salt and the rhythmic hush of waves far below. No camera crews. No stage lights. No thousands watching from behind screens. Just the sky, the sea, and 2 people who had already stood in the wreckage and chosen to rebuild. The ceremony took place at dawn. Elena had chosen the time. She said new beginnings belonged to first light, not fanfare. Andre had agreed immediately. He didn't want the kind of wedding he once thought he needed. He wanted this, something real, something theirs. They stood at the edge of the same cliffside property where he had once been left waiting. But this time the space looked different. Not because the flowers were fewer. Not because the chairs were gone. but because the weight was gone. No shame. No masks. No spectators. Just two hearts, finally unburdened. Elena wore a dress the color of soft ivory, the fabric flowing around her legs like seafoam. It was simple. No diamonds. No lace. No corset. Just a ribbon tied at the waist and sleeves that fluttered with the breeze. In her hair was a single silver pin, a gift from Andre, passed down from his mother, whom he had never known but somehow felt present that morning. Andre stood barefoot in sand-colored linen slacks and a white shirt with the top button undone. He didn't wear a tie. He didn't need to impress anyone. Elena looked at him and smiled, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And that smile lit something inside him that no spotlight ever could. The officiant was a retired minister from a nearby coastal town. A quiet man who'd once performed ceremonies for couples who had eloped and wanted nothing more than to say yes to each other without the noise of the world. He said only what was necessary. No rehearsed monologue. No theatrical verses. Just this. Do you promise to choose each other? Not once, not twice, but every ordinary day that follows? Andre took Elena's hand. I promise, he said. She squeezed his fingers and looked directly into his soul. I do. They exchanged rings, nothing extravagant. Elena's was a narrow band with a single sapphire, the same shade as the sky above them. Andre's was brushed silver, engraved on the inside with 4 small words. You are not alone. He hadn't told her he'd done that. When she slipped it onto his finger and saw the inscription, her breath caught. I needed to hear that too, she whispered. He smiled. Now we never have to forget. They kissed, soft, slow, sacred. A kiss not made for an audience, but for the ache of 2 people who had earned each other the hard way. The minister nodded quietly and stepped aside. It was done. They were married. No applause echoed across the cliff. No stream went live. No tabloids buzzed. But something far more profound happened. Peace. It settled over them like a warm blanket, heavier and more comforting than any diamond-studded declaration ever could be. They stayed by the cliff for a long while after. No rush. No plan. Just standing barefoot in the grass, holding hands, eyes closed, forehead to forehead. Later, they returned to the cabin. There was no reception, only a homemade breakfast of toast, eggs, and fruit. They ate barefoot in the kitchen, plates clinking gently, the scent of fresh coffee wafting through the air. Andre pulled a small notebook from his pocket, the one Elena had given him months earlier. He flipped to the first page he ever wrote in, ran his thumb over the words. I don't want to be alone. Then he turned to the last page and wrote, Today I said yes to the one who saw me, not as the man the world wanted, but as the man I was when no one was looking. I was never alone. I just hadn't found her yet. Elena walked up behind him, reading over his shoulder. She kissed his cheek and whispered, You found me now. He looked back at her, heart full. And I'm never letting go. That night, they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the windows open, the waves below like a lullaby. No spotlight, no posts, no audience, just love, just breath, just peace. A wedding of 2 hearts, quiet, sacred, eternal. Mornings in the Miller household no longer began in silence. They began with tiny footsteps, squeals of laughter, and the unmistakable chaos of twin toddlers who believed the entire world was their playground. The sun was just beginning to filter through the linen curtains when Andre opened his eyes. A tiny sock lay on his pillow. He blinked, amused but not surprised, and sat up just in time to see 2 small shapes sprinting down the hallway. One in mismatched pajamas, the other in nothing but a superhero cape and a diaper. "Daddy's awake!" came a triumphant shout from down the corridor. A moment later, one of the twins, Luca, ran into the room clutching a stuffed fox, climbed onto the bed with the urgency of a firefighter, and launched himself into Andre's lap. "Oof, morning soldier," Andre chuckled, catching him midair. "Luca says it's pancake day," the boy declared, eyes wide. "Does he now?" Andre replied, raising an eyebrow. Before he could negotiate the terms of breakfast, the other twin, Mila, appeared in the doorway, dragging a wooden spoon and a bowl filled with toy blocks. "Mama says Daddy can cook," she announced proudly. Andre glanced across the room toward the open door of their master suite. Elena stood there, leaning against the frame, one eyebrow raised, a smirk playing on her lips. She wore one of his old shirts, sleeves rolled up, her hair tied in a lazy bun. A vision, as always. "And did Mama say that?" he asked with a grin. "I might have," she said, walking in and placing a kiss on the top of his head before scooping Mila into her arms. "But only because someone's banana pancakes are legendary." "You flatter me," he teased, standing up with Luca on his hip. "I married you, didn't I?" They made their way to the kitchen together, a dance of familiarity and gentle chaos. Mila banged her spoon on the table, while Luca tried to feed the fox a block of butter. Andre poured the batter onto the pan, while Elena scooped coffee into the French press. There were no nannies here, no assistants. Not on mornings like this. They chose this. Not because they had to prove anything, but because this was the life they had built, together, deliberately, every single day since that morning on the cliff. After breakfast, Andre took the twins outside to the garden. The sky was clear, the grass still wet with dew. He watched them chase butterflies, fall down and get up again. Their laughter echoed across the trees, wild and free. And for a moment, he just stood there, breathing it in. This was not the life he'd imagined in his 20s, surrounded by glass towers, women in designer heels, and hollow applause. This was better. It was honest. When the children napped, he and Elena would sit on the back porch, fingers entwined, the air quiet around them. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they read. Often they just existed in silence, together, and that was enough. In the evenings, he read to the twins while Elena folded laundry beside them. They always begged for the same story, the lonely dragon who found a family. He had written it for them on their second birthday. The dragon's name was Andre. They didn't know that yet. One night, after the twins had fallen asleep, Andre wandered into his study. The walls were lined with books, and a small fireplace flickered in the corner. On his desk was the same leather-bound journal Elena had given him all those years ago. He opened it again. The first page still held those familiar words. "I don't want to be alone." He turned to the last entry, the one from the morning of their wedding, and added a new line beneath it, dated 5 years later. "I never was. I just didn't know where to look." He paused, then wrote another. "Now I have everything." And none of it came from noise. It came from quiet loyalty, steady love, and the woman who stayed. A sound at the door. Elena stepped in, barefoot, a cardigan pulled loosely around her. She smiled sleepily. "Writing again?" she asked, nodding toward the journal. He stood up, walked over, and slipped his arms around her waist. "Just reminding myself of where I've been." "And where are you now?" she asked softly. He kissed her forehead and held her close. "Exactly where I belong." The room fell silent again, except for the quiet crackle of the fire and the steady rhythm of their breaths. Outside, the moon hung low over the trees, casting silver light over a home that pulsed with laughter, life, and the kind of love that no headline would ever understand. And inside that home, a man who had once been alone, who had once been left behind in front of the whole world, now stood in the arms of the only woman who had ever seen all of him, and stayed. Forever. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.